Now, more of the C4 and Brian Neiman podcast.
From Republican former Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford to current Democrat State Delegate Lily Kwai to former chair of the Maryland Democratic Party, Terry Learman, who, by the way, also is the father of our current comptroller, Brooke Learman. These are just some of the people, Bruce Elliott and audience, that have come together, crossing party lines to say that Maryland's primary process needs to change when it comes to primary elections like today, that it needs to open up because of, Bruce, the 1 million unaffiliated as I am, independent voters that are registered, they can't participate. They can't be a part of today's ongoing event. Joining us now to talk about this, because this is part of a national discussion that is happening, is attorney Jeremy Gruber. He's the senior vice president of the organization Open Primaries. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Look, I appreciate you joining our show. Bruce Elliott is on here with me, too. He'll be talking with you as well. Let's talk about open primaries. And, you just had a press conference last week where you had the names I just mentioned and others on board. What is it that you're seeing here in Maryland and across the country, Jeremy?
Well, we're seeing a massive growth of independent voters as more and more voters leave the two major parties. Independents, CNN just released a poll this past week. 47% of the country now identify as independent. 10,000 Americans leave the Republican and Democratic parties every week. Everybody is going independent in this country, but our election system isn't designed for them. It's designed for party members, of which there's less than half of the country now. And that means increasingly millions of independent voters are shut out of primary elections, which are often the most meaningful elections we have.
In that case, in this state, you have, I think, actually, it's more independents than Republicans currently registered to vote. If not more, they're very, very close. Both of them are around 25%, around 50% of the voters registered here are Democrats. Why don't just argument for the sake of argument here, why don't the independent voters say, we're going to have our own primary, and then we will be able to vote for either Republican or Democrat nominee in the independent primary? Would that be a workable solution?
I don't think so, because the primaries are set up by the state government. They are set up to identify and move mainstream candidates onto the general election. Independent voters are looking to participate in that process, in the process where meaningful choices are happening. And you pointed out a great number, over a million independent voters in the state of Maryland. That's not just more voters than Republicans. That's more voters than exists in the entire state of neighboring Delaware of all political parties. We're talking about massive groups of voters that are shut out of these really important elections.
Jeremy Gruber, once again, Senior Vice President, Open Primaries, is on board with us. We're talking about a movement that is really growing to see that Maryland voters like me, unaffiliated now, was a former Democrat, can participate in today's elections. When I was in Annapolis, Jeremy, as a member of the legislature, I introduced legislation to open our primaries up. As you see, it was not successful because we're still talking about it now. Mm-hmm. Delegate Lily Kwai, I hope I'm saying that name right, she introduced legislation this past session to open up our primary system. Can you talk about, her experience doing that?
Yeah, and it's Delegate Lily Chi, and she introduced an open primary bill this session. It was really a remarkable hearing that they held for the bill. I was there, and we had to wait 4 hours for the hearing of the bill. Meanwhile, all the different bills that cycled through the Elections Committee in the legislature saw the same group of professional advocates from organizations that were being paid to be there, testify in front of those bills. And those were legitimate bills.
Sure.
But then the open primaries bill comes up. And you know what happens? Over 24 regular citizens, not paid to be there. These are people that took off from work. We're talking about teachers, veterans, people from all walks of life, took off their day to show up and testify for something very simple and something very profound, which was, please let us vote. It was a remarkable showing of where this issue is centered in the state of Maryland and around the country. And unfortunately, the committee has not seen fit to move that bill forward.
Is there any relationship between the number of people who are registered to vote in a state and their willingness to have participation by independents? I mention this because Maryland has the 7th highest percentage of potential voters registered to vote at around 80%. Oregon's the highest at 83%. Is there any relationship there?
Oh, it's absolutely. I mean, when you don't let over a million people vote, your voter participation levels are going to be lower. Every state that has open primaries sees higher voter participation. And look what just happened this cycle so far in the state of Maryland. Only 185,000 Marylanders out of almost close to 4 million registered voters participated in early voting this year. That's 5%. 5% of the state that was participating in the primary election. When you shut out so many people, you're not just shutting them out from voting, but what you're doing is you're impacting the competitive nature of the system so that everybody, Republicans, Democrats, as well as independents, have less competition in their election system. When you have less competition, you have less meaningful choices. You're less likely to come out because you know who's going to win before you even show up at the polls.
Jeremy Gruber, when it comes to some of the arguments against allowing unaffiliateds in Maryland to participate, it's that, they're going to somehow weight the primary one way or the other, try to organize against Democrats or organize against Republicans. Have we seen it in other states? Have we seen organized efforts to do things like that in other states?
Well, there's always chatter, but no, there have not been organized efforts. But here's the real clue as to what's actually happening. It's actually the reverse of what they're claiming. It's actually the closed primary in Maryland that is creating this type of nefarious activity. Because when you have a system that tells you your only chance to vote is to join a party, well, what do you think is going to happen? A lot of people are going to join that party that don't actually affiliate with that party, that don't believe in that party. In fact, we just conducted a poll in New York City. There's over 1 million independent voters in New York City, just like in Maryland. But we conducted a poll not of independents, but of Democratic Party voters in New York City. And we asked them, do you identify with the Democratic Party? You're registered, but do you identify? 40%, 4 out of 10 said no, we identify as Republicans or independents. But we know that in order to have a meaningful vote in New York City, we have to affiliate with the Democratic Party. And it's no dissimilar in Maryland. People know that if you want to have a real vote, you have to affiliate with the majority party or be shut out. Now, increasingly, more and more people are saying, I'm sorry, I don't want to join the parties. I don't agree with the parties. And they're finding themselves on the sidelines. But it's amazing how many people that are actually part of the parties themselves don't actually see that either.
Okay, in the circumstance where here in the state of Maryland, independents cannot vote in the primary and on either side, is there a fair legal argument to be made that then the state should not be paying for these primaries?
Well, there absolutely is, and there's litigation right now that's being that we are championing, and we've been working with former Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, as was mentioned earlier, on a challenge to Maryland's closed primary under the state constitution. The state constitution of Maryland says everybody is allowed to vote in a public election. And make no mistake, primaries are public elections. They're taxpayer funded. They're run in government buildings. They're administered by the state. Every aspect of primaries in the state of Maryland are public. However, increasingly more and more voters, over 1 million, are shut out. And so our litigation is challenging that very fact. And it's saying, look, if the parties want to keep the primaries closed, by all means, your private associations, but don't make the taxpayers pay for it. Mm-hmm. Don't make the taxpayers, don't make the public cover the price for your private exclusionary elections.
To me, that's a fair argument, that there's no reason for C4, who is registered as an independent, to be paying for my primary experience, and I'm a Republican. That we're making him pay for things that he can't participate in. I think there's a pretty legal argument there that has to stop. Of the two possible choices you have then, either the state stops paying for these things or that independents get to vote in the primaries. Which would be the option you would choose?
Oh, I wouldn't choose either option over the other. I think the most critical thing that Marylanders and voters across the country want is a fair and equal shake at the polls. And whatever avenue we have presented to us to get there, that's the avenue we want to take. Where no one's asking for a particular type of primary system. No one is asking for anything other than a fair shake. And whether that's through the legislature, through the courts, or otherwise, independent Marylanders deserve a fair shake and an equal say.
You have been listening to the C4 and Brian Nieman podcast.